All right, welcome back to the program. My guest is joining me right now, Johnson Chukwu, the Group Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer at Cowry Asset Management. Chief Chukwu, welcome again to the program.
Good day, Chief Nancy. Hi, Chief Nancy. Thank you for having me.
Welcome to the program. We have a lot to discuss today. Of course, Rivers State, this emergency rule in the state, which we saw the president's announcement on Tuesday. I would like to hear from you. Chief Chukwu, do you have an office in Port Harcourt? Because I mentioned it earlier. I don't know. I'm not clear about that. Where's Mr. Chukwu? Can I see him, please?
Yes, I'm here. I have an office in Port Harcourt.
So I was right about that, to say that my guest, I think, has an office in Port Harcourt. Let me start from that. What has been the sentiments from your staff in Port Harcourt? I assume you would have asked after them and to know, what's happening there in your office.
Yes, Nancy, as of yesterday, when I followed up with them, we've not spoken this morning. As of yesterday evening, they said the environment was still calm, but of course there is high tension and there's a lot of apprehension among citizens. So people are actually avoiding where they consider volatile areas. Offices, we told them to close as early as possible. If they see any sign of unrest, they should quickly go home, or they shouldn't get to work if they think the environment is too tense. But there is high level of apprehension. People can feel the tension, which can easily be ignited. So a lot of concerns from people in Rivers State, particularly in Port Harcourt, that this could snowball into some level of social unrest or violence.
Do you think that President Tinubu's move on Tuesday evening has finally put to rest the uneasy calm surrounding the political crisis that started in October of 2023 to rest by, of course, swearing in a sole administrator? Why I'm coining it this way is that the political uncertainty has been there for almost 2 years now. Do you think that President Tinubu's action on Tuesday has brought a sense of certainty to the economics of Rivers State, bearing in mind that Rivers State is the second largest economy in Nigeria, accounts for 40% of onshore crude oil production, accounts for 100% of liquefied natural gas that we have in the country. So with President Tinubu's action on Tuesday, do you think that it has brought some kind of certainty that, okay, the government, we are in charge, don't be perturbed?
Nancy, it's still early in the day to get to that level of conclusion. One of the things I would say is that the general consensus among the lawyers who have spoken on this in the public space is that the president's pronouncement may not stand. There was a debate I saw this morning where the number of members of the National Assembly as it relates to each party was reeled out, and the consensus among those analysts is that it will be difficult for the ruling party to get the necessary two-thirds of the members of the Senate and House of Representatives to be able to pass this emergency law. I think there was even a skit I saw now, not a skit, a video I saw where was a shouting match among female legislators in the National Assembly on the same issue. So it's too early in the day. The crisis may just be at its infancy, or maybe it has been resolved. Let's hope it has been resolved. But what the opinion of lawyers is indicating to the contrary. But most importantly, whatever the government does, what matters is the share of the heart of the people in that area. You must make sure that whatever you are doing is in tandem or aligns with the expectations and the beliefs and values and respect of the people of Rivers State. Anything to the contrary will mean that you are going to use force to enforce safety or security or calmness. And we know how difficult it is in the Niger Delta region, where there are a lot of arms, unauthorized arms around. So I think the president must be conscious of the fact that it is not going to be a gunboat strategy that will work. You need to be sure that what you are doing is in alignment with the love and expectations and beliefs of people of Rivers State. Anything to the contrary, it will be a piece of the graveyard.
Do you think that this political crisis would impact the economic stability of Rivers State, because the Sim Fubara signed into law 1.18 trillion naira. That's 1.1 trillion naira Rivers State budget earlier this year. That's in January of this year. Of course, that has been avoided even by the Supreme Court. That how can he do that in the presence, I think, of three state assembly members? So how do you see this concerning the economic stability of the state, bearing in mind also that I also saw, I think was in the news yesterday, that there were mass protests from workers in Rivers State concerning budget delay?
Nancy, I think there was also a news article this morning that says that the president or the presidency has indicated that
That it should be allocated to them. The funds should be released to them, yes.
Yes, I wouldn't know whether the president has the powers to give instructions that are contrary or that kind of defines the directives or court judgment of the Supreme Court. I think the Supreme Court judgment was simple. You need to present the state budget to the State House Assembly. Of course, the president said he has suspended the State House Assembly. So there are too many jigsaws in this situation. But what we must recognize is that when you have social unrest, you're going to have the economy affected, no matter where, whether it be Rivers, Kano, Yola, Adamawa, or anywhere in the world where you have social unrest. And I pray, of course, the daily prayer is not a strategy, that this does not dovetail or snowball into a social unrest. If they are able to pepper through, and I use the word pepper through, the issues around the legitimacy of the appointment of the sole administrator, and he assumes office, he also needs a cooperation, which I talk about the share of the heart. He also needs a cooperation of the members of the state civil service to work out to implement any economic plan, including implementing the budget. So again, there's no budget, because if the budget that was approved or so-called approved by the Sim Fubara government was not properly approved, then it simply means that the sole administrator will have to prepare a budget which will send to the Federal Executive Council or the Presidency or National Assembly to approve, depending on what the law says that relates to emergency rule where the governor is no longer on the seat. So these are factors that
it's a very dicey one there. Yes, because
yes, I say that there are too many balls in the air.
Yeah,
as it stands.
Yes,
but if you have a curfew, you're going to have a negative economic impact.
Yeah, because that's why I actually asked the question. Lateef Fagbemi in AGF, Attorney General of the Federation, of course, they say that the federal government will release the funds to the sole administrator. Does that mean that the sole administrator would work with Sim Fubara's 2025 budget and take it to FEC, and the National Assembly, you know, the national FEC now that has President Tinubu there would look at the budget, they present it as an executive bill to the National Assembly. Mr. Chukwu, are you still there? We'll present
yes, I'm here.
Yes, you know, so it's a bit dicey there. Or will he prepare his own? You know, so what do you think? That's why I talked about that economic instability.
You know, and I said
uncertainty around that.
That's why I say that it's too early in the day for us to be able to say, look, this action of the president will address the burden crisis. Let me give you another angle to it. The president, in his proclamation and pronouncement, said that the sole administrator cannot make any law.
Yes.
You know that the budget is a law.
It's a law.
So if he cannot make law,
so where would he get the money to spend?
So then, because the budget is a law, and if he cannot make law, that means he cannot prepare a budget. So and I said too many things that they need to have weighed properly before.
So where will he get the money to spend? Because if President Tinubu says he cannot make laws, but I think there could be regulations. Laws and regulations are different. So where would he be empowered to financially, provide for the state as a sole administrator for the initial 6 months, according to President Tinubu? It's really dicey there, you know. Anyway, you are saying we are still at an infant stage. Or it's also good we're having these conversations so that we can also prick their minds and their brains, because to every political uncertainty or crisis, there's an economic undertone to this, and that's why I'm doing this show.
There's always an economic ramification to it. And I think I have a feeling, just a feeling, that they did not think through every aspect of the declaration. because like I said, in the first place, lawyers have punctured holes at the declaration saying it's not legal. Two, the pronouncement that they said the sole administrator cannot make law when the budget is a law and there's no existing budget. The budget has been nullified by the Supreme Court, so you need to make a different budget. Three, they also have needed to have fed a pulse of Rivers people what they prefer and not impose a contraction or a political system or an administrative system that is people are very much against. And four, we must also have to recognize the critical nature of the economy of Rivers State. And whatever is done must be done to protect and support the continuous expansion or growth of that economy. Too many things in the air, and we are where we are. It is what it is. So we keep talking, and we hope that whatever corrections can be made should be made immediately to address these concerns. I have a feeling from the feelers I got from Rivers that the people of Rivers State would ordinarily not have preferred a state of emergency. They did not feel that the situation had degenerated to a state of emergency. And they also felt that law and order maintenance are under the purview of the president, not the governor. The governor does not control police, doesn't control the military. And it is these two agents of government that are most critical in protecting the pipelines and the oil facilities. And most importantly, we know when the government adopted a gumbo strategy to try to drive away to curtail breach of pipelines in the country. We know they almost shut down the entire oil industry. And when we now adopted a revised approach where a lot of engagement and we know the result that achieved under the government. So we have a history of what works and what doesn't work. Gumbo strategy relates to extraction. The extractive industry in the country has never worked. So we must always ensure that we engage with the people where oil is produced from.
Yeah,
and
because,
any other industry product.
Yeah, because if the president says that the sole administrator cannot make laws, 2025 budget is a law. That means that state workers will be owed. So even though that the AGF has spoken that the funds will be released, perhaps this would also be released. The sole administrator will just be administering. It's a difficult one, even for me. It's difficult for me to say, you know, because it's actually, but I do think that we need more clarity on that. Just like you said, perhaps they didn't also think this through in terms of if you're saying you can't make a law, yet you're saying that you're releasing the funds to him, and the Supreme Court even barred the CBN and the Accountant General of the Federation. That judgment was given because Sim Fubara did not follow the right process that the National Assembly, the legislators are supposed to sign off on that. So it's like you're almost committing the same thing. This one is like, anyway, so much, so much to say. But let me take a look at Rivers State's contribution to the nation's economy. Of course, in the midst of all of this, we saw oil explosions. But Renaissance has come up to say that the Trans-Niger route is, pipeline is back. So if you take a look at the gross state's products of Rivers State, is estimated at around $28.4 billion. I mentioned earlier that Rivers State is the second largest economy in Nigeria. With that gross state product of $28 billion, Rivers State economy has an economy even larger than some African countries, or within even some African countries, like Rwanda and Botswana. So Rivers State has an economy of like Rwanda, or even surpasses the economy of Rwanda and Botswana. Botswana is diamond rich. Rivers State is oil rich. How do you think that this political crisis and uncertainty would impact the state's overall output as well as financial viability?
Well, if you look at that GDP of Rivers State, a lot of it has to do with oil. Of course, we know liquefied natural gas in Rivers State, and that's only a liquefied gas plant we have in the country. We know that rivers account for up to 40% of our crude oil production and exports. So if for any reason crude oil production is affected, once you have crude oil affected, it also affects gas production, which will mean that the gas going to LNG will be reduced. And bear in mind that the allocation of Federation account funds are based partly on place of generation or the soil it is sourced. River states will be affected in terms of what comes to them. Again, 13% of it is entirely based on what is produced in each of the oil producing states. So that will also be negatively affected. So clearly, river will be affected. And then if you look at the macro level, you recognize that if, for instance, because of budget implementation budget, salaries are not paid, it then means consumption will. If consumption declines, even production will decline. The traders will suffer because they won't. Civil servants won't have money to buy goods and services. Landlords will suffer because civil servants will not be able to pay their rent, and you are going to see this spill into an economic, call it a subnational economic recession in Rivers State, because the economy is a chain. But you also know that when you have such a situation, it can also trigger some of increase in criminal activities. So it's the implications are multifaceted, and you really can't sit down and just hazard a gaze on everything that could happen. That's why it's necessary we don't start out as we don't start that descent into a crisis situation we can manage our implications.
Do you think that there will be a contagion effect in business? They have something they call contagion effect, especially, we don't pray for it though, you know, but especially states like Bayelsa that are close by and all of that. That's one. Then number two, for the next 6 months, the impact on trade, I must say, because even if you take a look at Port Harcourt, it has an international pathway that serves as a gateway, a hub for both businesses. Could the political uncertainty also deter travel? And yes, deter travel, because you can imagine a state that has oil infrastructure and all of that, definitely attracting oil companies and foreign investors. What do you think about that? The contagion effect and as well as the impact on travel, business travel?
It depends on the magnitude. All guys start from a localized perspective, just like fire. They tell no fire unless you have an explosion. Even if you have an explosion, it will have points of commencement to a start point, and then if it's not contained, it spreads. Bear in mind that the kidnapping we have today in Nigeria started somewhere in Warri years back. Everything we talk about kidnapping, first major commercial kidnapping started in Warri. Europeans and the foreigners moved away from Warri to Rivers, and the contagion continued, and then it moved to Rivers, and then from Rivers it spread to Abia, and then has spread to at some point, Anambra was one of the worst states with kidnapping. So, and that same kidnapping thought was now localized in the south, east, and south, and has spread to the country, including the north central, northeast, and northwest. So that's the criminal activities expand once it is not contained. I didn't pray, but the issue is not about prayer. Prayer works, but action, prayer work is dead. The government must do quickly. Liver Port Airport is a transit port to people going to Bayelsa at the minimum. So if you have that said, it certainly have to make a difference in Bayelsa. But as it stands today, a lot of foreigners have actually left.
Yes.
Many of the companies, including of those regions. A large proportion of my friends who are from Rivertown live in Lagos or live in Abuja, because they all exited when they kidnapped and moved from white men and white women to black men, and from black men to indigenous. And like I said, you really can't sit and hazard a guess of a minor, containable social dispute can spill into multifaceted, multifarious social and economic problems. It is better to be nib in the bud than to see how far you can go.
If we take a look at the last 2 years or so since this political crisis started, I was trying to look at the IGR of Rivers State, and I'm wondering what it will look like this year. What is your own analysis concerning it? Because if you take a look at IGR, the state ranks, I think, among Nigeria's top 3. In terms of IGR, you have, I think, Lagos, Rivers, and FCT, if I'm not mistaken. Could this political crisis also slow down revenue collection, bearing in mind that this is a man, the sole administrator now, retired Vice Admiral Abbas, coming in? He will also try to find his feet. I assume he has not been in this kind of position before, so he will try as much as possible to find his feet. How will this slow down revenue collection and perhaps even disrupt public finances, as we've mentioned earlier on?
Is through the apparatus of government, the bureaucracy. You have obviously the Rivers report, and I cooperate with the administrator. You are not going to see you're going to see negative impact on revenue collection. But beyond that, if oil products said, a lot of the revenue derived from the states and derived from oil workers and oil-based activities, withholding tax on oil contracts and all those things, personal income tax. So you're going to see that affected. Then if the civil servants are also not paid, then you will also see that their pay as you earn income will be affected. If they are not able to do businesses with buy goods and services, the income of even the traders in the state will be affected, and then any tax derivable from their income will also be affected. Clearly, once you have a social crisis, you are going to have economic crisis, and that affects the income of citizens and companies in tax jurisdiction will affect the income tax earned from that jurisdiction. So the government must put its mind on that. We are likely going to see a decline in the internally generated revenue of the states. But I have not bothered to check. I hear there was a material increase since the assumption of office by Sim Fubara.
Yes, that's what Sim Fubara said, yes. I think, yes, there's been a material increase of IGR.
But I hear there's been a material increase. So whatever he did to lead to that material increase may be reversed by forces that are against his governance. Assuming those measures he took were against the interest of those forces that are against his governance. So in that case, you may be going back to where they were prior to his assumption of office.
If we take a look at the intervention, of course, by Mr. President, do you think that that action will deter, will deter economic saboteurs, just like even as the AGF, Lateef Fagbemi SAN, mentioned, targeting oil infrastructure, pipelines, and all of that? Do you think that that will really deter, the attacks rather on pipelines?
Nancy, I'm not aware that those who attack the pipelines have been arrested. That's the first thing.
But with heavy military presence there now, perhaps around the states, perhaps, do you think that it will deter? That was done before President Tinubu declared the state of emergency.
This is what I pray, and I have used this word multiple times, that this does not degenerate. Remember that when it degenerates, you're going to be dealing with an asymmetric warfare where you do not have a defined army. The person who is singing hallelujah today and is wearing cassock, maybe they want to blow the pipeline when you turn your back. So when you are fighting a war against the people, and I repeat, if you want to fight a war against the people see you as an occupation force and you cannot win that war. The case of America and Vietnam is a case where even no matter how strong you are as a superpower, you can't win a war when people see an occupation force. So it is necessary that the Rivers State people align or carried along with whatever the government is doing. If they feel exploited, then, and they decide as a people to oppose the government, there's no military deployment that can manage it. We have multiple asymmetric war corridors in the country. We have in several states in the Northeast. We have in places like Zamfara, to some extent in places like Katsina. We've not been able to deploy drones and military men to arrest it. So we must not create another battlefield in this country. We must, whatever is required to avoid that, we must do that.
What does this federal intervention mean for fiscal federalism, especially concerning state autonomy in economic matters? That's one. Then number two, how do you think that this will reshape the relationship between state governors and the federal and the president as it is? I asked this question on Wednesday to when I looked at this topic, the kind of relationship that we'll have between federal and state governments moving forward. The PDP Governors Forum has spoken, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I'm wondering what will be going on within the corridors of the different state houses where the governors are, what they will be telling themselves in the rooms, that if anything happens, then the president can just declare a state of emergency in our state. So I'm just taking a look at fiscal federalism, the impact on fiscal federalism, and the relationship between the federal and state governments moving forward.
Okay, I think the issue about fiscal federalism is among the debates going on, and is what the debates going on among the lawyers. And I wouldn't know whether that debate would be tested in the law courts to determine whether the president has the powers to suspend the governor. But like the general opinion of most of the opinions we've gotten or heard from the learned gentlemen is that the president does not have such power. So that simply means a clear breach of fiscal federalism, assuming that is what courts end up saying. But assuming that this declaration is sustained, then you would have evolved a master-servant relationship between the presidency and the governors, because it then is that the president has authority, has a line and functional authority over the governors. Bear in mind, leadership and management, the only person you can suspend is the person you have a functional superior authority over. You can't suspend somebody who does not report to you and you have no functional authority over that person. So it then means that by this precedent, we would have set a functional line authority between the governors and the president. And where the governors do not conform to the expectations of the president can suspend them. But like I said, I'm talking from leadership and management experience. Nancy, I can't suspend you in AI. No matter what you do, there's no way I can suspend you because I have no functional authority over you. But I can ask my head of human resources to suspend somebody who is working with Cowry, assuming the person breaches any of our fundamental laws and regulations that entail suspension. But no matter what you do, I can't suspend you because I have no functional authority over you.
I think for some people that are also saying that the president has that power, I think they're deriving it from 305, isn't it? Section 305 of the Constitution. I think
the
phrase that says, I think, extraordinary. So they are saying that extraordinary, the president falls within the extraordinary measure. So extraordinary can mean different things, because the Constitution did not spell out that. You know, that's the political, economic angle to it, but...
Yeah, that's why I said in leadership, and like I said, if this is sustained, then a president would have been set for a line functional authority of the president over the governors. So that's what the interpretation of that section of the Constitution will now imply, that the president can suspend the governor. But the governor's power is supposed to be derived from the election. But I'm not going to dwell into legal niceties. Let's allow the experts to deal with that. But I'm talking of leadership and management. And in the leadership lexicon, you can't suspend anybody who you do not have functional authority over.
Mr. Chukwu, if we take a look at this genesis, is it perhaps appropriate to read it this way, that the economic soul of Rivers State and its resources is the fight and the war that we're seeing? You know, because I think I mentioned it on the program on Wednesday too, talking about the economic resources, and I've enumerated here how Rivers State is important to Nigeria. So do you think that this is also about economic resources control? Who controls what? The monies and all of that. And what is the plight of the people in all of this at the end of the day?
Okay, Nancy, you are drawing me to an area I don't have core competence, and that is basically politics. But I can, as a Nigerian, I also have my personal opinion. Maybe what I would express is personal opinion, not my not speaking as the MD of Cowry, but a personal opinion as any Nigerian who has been observing and what's going on. The dispute seems to be between government and an individual. And I think the government anywhere in the world have what they call public interest authority. And in a dispute between an individual and government, the government authority will supersede that of the individual. And I think, and that's why I said personal opinion, I think we are dealing with an aberration. Nancy, my house is in Lekki Phase 1. If the government feels, if I'm fighting with the government, and the government decides to turn my house into a dustbin, a site, they can do that and say it's for public interest. There is no way in the world where, unless the government overreaches itself, that the stack of power and influence will swing in favor of an individual against the common interest of the people. But I will just leave it at that. Like I said, it is not my area of core competence, but as a Nigerian, I have my opinion, and I think this is a clear case of this. And there's no concealment of the interest of the party, the individual party, who has said, look, I installed this person, I have the right to put a pipe on the government treasury and make it. And I must be given that pipe to make it. And then we're just peppering over that. And then we want the country to progress. Which country works? If you make it, this will be against you. I tell you that I need to put the pipe on because once you have worked to install a person, the person has immunity, and the person is sitting on office that's constitutionally empowered. You really can't go into confrontation and will be winning at all instances, and still have
Mr. Chukwu, you know that the politics thing is a very intricate topic, and like I mentioned, even at the beginning, I don't have interest in the politics of it. For me, it's about the economics, the business of it, the market perspective, the investment perspective of it. Because if you take a look at even the two people that are being bandied around for the last 2 years, Sim Fubara and Minister Wike, for all intents and purposes, when they had that agreement, nobody knew, you know. So, but at the end of the day, their decisions or actions or inactions are impacting the state, impacting the people, would have larger implications that we've been unfolding in the last few minutes or so. But anyway, just as we end, I would like you to comment on perhaps what you think was next. If there's still a way forward, or what the president has done is the way forward, and we'll wait and see what would happen eventually. Then the second part is the Dangote refinery press release. I trust that you have seen it, that is temporarily halting the sale of petroleum products in Naira due to a mismatch between Naira sales and dollar-denominated crude purchases. What do you think about that? A lot of people have said, okay, we've seen some kind of relief in terms of petrol prices at the pumps from about 1,000 or so to, I think I last bought at 930 Naira. What do you think about this? Bearing in mind that, you know, we had a Naira for crude agreement between Dangote Refinery and the NNPC Limited that was initiated, I think, in October 2024, if I'm not mistaken. So with all of this, what do you think? Make some sense out of it for me.
Okay, let me start from the first question. What do I think is the next? I think a lot revolve around the presentation. I want to think that the president has a will to pull back and responsibility in Rivers. And how can they do that? The president can speak with his ally, Minister Wike, to talk to the state House of Assembly members to some meetings, accommodation with the governor. And then the president can also talk to the governor. And then it would be a win-win situation. The president can cancel the deal, which may, all things being equal, fail at the National Assembly. And it will not be why, it will not be the interest of the president that fails at the National Assembly. There's a window to kind of reach some level of accommodation. If Minister Wike pull back from his extreme position, I think there should be some level of accommodation and agreement between the president. Then we could have peace and the country will move forward. The president should use his authority as the president and influence over the combatants to resolve this more amicably than the government's approach that have been adopted. So going to the Dangote refinery's pronouncement that he has temporarily halted, I think a couple of weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, the news came that NNPC was going to cease supplying crude for Naira, the Naira for crude arrangement. And NNPC came out to say, look, the arrangement was to end on 31st of March. And that they were in negotiation and discussion with Dangote for a possible renewal or another agreement that will succeed the current agreement that will end on 31st of March. So it then means that we have not gotten to the 1st of March. I wouldn't know whether they are unable to reach an agreement for a rollover or a modification of the Naira for crude arrangement. But looking at what Dangote said, if Dangote has to pay for crude in dollar, it's automatic that they will charge dollar for from the sale of their refined petroleum products. But one thing we have to recognize is this, that as it stands today, until we increase materially our crude oil production, so that whatever crude is given to Dangote in Naira is not for a foregone export of crude, it's not export that is foregone, then the impact on our foreign exchange reserve of Naira for crude is very minimal, because whatever crude we give to Dangote in Naira is crude we would have exported at $N dollar. So Nigerians do not recognize that it is not the Naira for crude that brought down the price of refined petroleum products or pump price of fuel. It is because the Dangote refinery and NNPC went into a head-on price war, and we are undercutting themselves in trying to present to Nigerians that
who looks better.
Yes, selling at lower price. Added to the fact that crude prices have been declining. Crude price yesterday was trading at below $70, and crude price determines the price of ice. Yesterday, ice was about $653 per metric ton. So these are factors that and then we've seen some level of appreciation in the exchange rate. At some point in February last year, we are in the region of 1,900. We are currently at 1,540.
Yes.
Yeah. So an appreciation in Naira in the exchange rate have a salutary effect on the price of every commodity that it has import fuel.
Okay, I think Mr. Chukwu, we'll leave it at that. Thank you for your analysis as always. I wish you a lovely day.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And that's it. I've been speaking with Johnson Chukwu, who is the Group Managing Director of Cowry Asset Management, and we've been looking at the imbroglio in Rivers State. Like I mentioned, all we need is peace and progress. Peace and progress. Just before we go, let's also tell you that our business clinic for March is coming up next Friday, and we'll be talking about how to build your wealth from the scratch. Who is better to talk about is someone that has lived it and someone that is living it. Dr. Stephen Akitayo, he will be joining us. So send "I'm interested" to the WhatsApp and number on the screen. I hope my team puts that on the screen. That's it. To say "I'm interested" so that you can join us virtually. And you have the opportunity to ask all your questions regarding that topic. You can also send your questions ahead of time to that WhatsApp number. Be the best you can be and be the change that you want to see. I am Nancy Naji. Bye for now.